Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: throwing pots at police, blocking highways, protests are spreading across China as dissent boiling under Beijing's iron grip. We zoom in on the growing unrest. This October 1st marks 76 years of the Chinese Communist Party's tyranny in China. Chinese people around the globe are calling for an end to the party's rule. What's Golden Week, China's National Day holiday, like this year? Where does China's economy stand overall? An expert weighs in.
And the Chinese economy is basically stagnant.
And the empty seat left by a disappeared Chinese diplomat now filled by a spy official. A closer look at a possible shift in Beijing's diplomatic approach. A new Chinese coffee house in Manhattan fueling a protest over U.S. national security concerns. Our reporter spoke with protesters outside the Luckin coffee shop. Blocking traffic and even throwing pots at police officers, protests erupted across China in the days leading up to Wednesday's anniversary, marking 76 years since the Chinese Communist Party took over. Beijing has been holding events each year to mark the day. In China's southwestern Yunnan province, dozens of street vendors clashed with urban law enforcement and police last Saturday. Vendors threw pots and stools during the confrontation. The clash broke out after local urban law enforcement officers suspended their stalls and asked for extra fees. The vendors refused, saying they had faced eviction before, even after paying what was required. For many vendors, their stall is the family's only income.
Authorities could have asked what our demands are, but they didn't. They just came to evict us. We have to make a living. My kid has to go to school.
When vendors refused to leave, tensions boiled over, leading to clashes with the officers trying to evict them. After one vendor was beaten, others started throwing objects from their booths at the police. Several vendors were reportedly hurt and arrested. Authorities also took some food carts. Similar protests are happening across the country. In central Henan province, street vendors blocked traffic last Thursday to protest the closing of their night market. They want compensation from local authorities. In southern Guangxi province, villagers surrounded police after officers arrested a man defending their rights. The villagers were protesting against a company trying to take their forest land for mining. The crowd left only after police released the man. Up north in Hebei province, residents blocked roads for 2 days outside the local administrative office to protest the demolition of their homes. Their houses were torn down for urban development 7 years ago, but the residents say they still haven't received new housing or compensation to help with the move. Also in Hebei, construction workers blocked a highway toll booth to demand payment. They helped build the highway, but say they haven't been paid a cent.
We put sweat and tears into this, but you didn't pay us after finishing the job. What are you doing?
Local media covered the new highway opening but left out the protest. And further north, in China's Inner Mongolia region, about 200 small business owners protested for 4 days outside the local administrative office against higher heating bills. They clashed briefly with police. After the protest, officials canceled the price hike. As the Chinese Communist Party marks 76 years of rule, Chinese people in the U.S. and worldwide are protesting its brutal tyranny. Let's hear their stories and what they are standing up for. NTD's Flora Hua has the report.
This is the U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C. Chinese pro-democracy activists across America gathered to tell the world October 1st is not their national day, but a day of mourning for all of China. During times of peace, tens of millions of Chinese people have died under the CCP's tyranny. From the violent political campaigns and the Great Famine to the Tiananmen massacre and the COVID-19 pandemic, these Chinese protesters marched in front of the Chinese embassy, Capitol Hill, and the White House. Younger generations also took part in the anti-CCP movement, raising awareness of the Chinese regime's tactics.
On one hand, the CCP maintains authoritarian rule through repression. On the other hand, it uses united front tactics to deceive and divide us.
Moving north to Canada, Taiwanese, Hong Kongers, Tibetans, Uyghurs, and people from different backgrounds also held anti-CCP demonstrations in front of the Chinese consulate.
CCP lies, people die!
Falun Gong, a spiritual discipline originated in China, has been persecuted by the CCP for over 25 years. International rights groups report that the regime even steals organs from imprisoned practitioners for huge profits.
The CCP trades in live organs and continuously imprisons dissidents who oppose it. This, among other actions, represents the greatest harm that totalitarianism has inflicted on our present generation of human civilization.
Chinese people in Germany and the Netherlands are also calling for an end to the tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party. Flora Hua, NTD News.
Golden Week, China's National Day holiday. It used to be the big travel and spending season before the pandemic. So what's it like this year, and where does China's economy stand overall? We spoke with Christopher Balding for his take. He was a professor at Peking University's HSBC School of Business until 2018, when he was fired for pushing back against censorship. Now he's the founder of Sifter, smart social media platform, and New Kite Data Labs, a think tank focused on China, data technology, and the economy. Christopher Balding, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me, Tiffany.
And there's a big focus on this year's National Day in China, but what are you watching out for in terms of the economic situation around this year's holiday?
Well, I think there's a big emphasis in China this year on stimulating consumption. Earlier in the first half of this year, they rolled out a lot of consumption subsidies. And those consumption subsidies cost a lot of money, and they were used very, very rapidly. They've rolled out some additional subsidies, which have taken hold, but they're still having trouble stimulating consumption, even though that is a primary focus. But I think that is what I'm going to be watching. And then within a couple of months, we also have the annual big economic conference in Beijing coming up. So I think this is a very interesting time to watch signals on what Beijing is going to say about the economy and how they're going to try and basically jumpstart.
Now, in terms of boosting this economy, we saw a lot of authorities are banking on domestic travel during the 8 Golden Week holiday that they call it. There's a lot of focus on, say, planes, trains, and cars, and of course hotels and whatever spending there. According to one authority, this year there's an expected 2.4 billion journeys. That's up from last year's 2 billion. How much of an impact will that have on the consumer economy?
I would be very, very skeptical of that number, because that would be, if the numbers you're quoting are accurate, I've not seen those specific numbers, that would be a 20% increase from last year, and that would be quite steep. I mean, I can say very clearly, this time of year is one of the times of year when China goes on vacation. I do think one of the patterns that you are seeing in the Chinese economy, especially when it comes to travel, is that you do have more people traveling. But one of the things you have people spending less when they get there. So they'll bring instant noodles maybe rather than go out to dinner at a nice restaurant, as an example. So one of the things that is very clear is you're seeing people move, you're not seeing them spend in larger amounts. And that seems to me to indicate people are basically digging in for the long haul. This isn't seen as some type of short-term change. So they want to go and travel, see friends, things like that. They don't necessarily want to spend the money.
I want to zoom in on China's youth, because a lot of analysts are noting that, say, Gen Z or China's youth, they've watched their personal freedoms declining under Xi Jinping because he's getting more and more authoritarian. At the same time, they're also seeing their job prospects dwindling inside of China. And now a lot are pointing to, in the past, the Chinese regime always staked its reputation on unprecedented growth is what they're pushing for. And so now we have seen a bit Xi Jinping kind of pivoting to trying to rally the nation behind nationalism. How are you, given all of that, how are you viewing China's trajectory in terms of economic terms?
I think economically, it's basically stagnating. Now, when I say stagnating, I want to be very careful. There's absolutely certain things, that China is doing very well. Let's make no mistake about that. The macro economy of China at aggregate, for all intents and purposes, is stagnant. They're absolutely doing some amazing things in tech. There's other areas where things are I think, going very well. The macro economy at aggregate is it's basically stagnant. You take away things like, empty investments, you start accounting for all the losses that are held in the banks and things like that. And the Chinese economy is basically stagnant. This is why you're seeing such pressure on youth unemployment and things like that. There's enormous pressures in the Chinese economy. I don't know of any other way to say it.
On that note, maybe zooming out a bit here, looking forward, what does that mean for global economies? Because people do point to China being the world's second largest economy, quite intertwined with, say, the US and other ones. What would be the impact of that?
China is basically going to continue dumping products on global markets. If you pick almost any sector, China has just a wildly outsized portion of the capacity to build a product. Okay, if you take solar panels, for instance, okay, they basically have, let's use a round number and say, almost 100% of global supply capacity. This is excluding other countries that might have throughout the world that might have manufacturing capability in solar panels. So what that does is that basically puts enormous downward pricing pressure. And this is why one of the things that you've seen, even though the U.S. has talked about it for years, hey, work with us to deal with China, a lot of countries, I'm looking directly at Europe when I say this, simply haven't wanted to have that conversation. And now their industries are getting absolutely decimated by Chinese companies dumping products onto the European market after they got cut out of the United States market.
Well, Christopher Balding, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
For the first time, China has appointed a senior intelligence official to a top diplomatic post. This signals a shift in how Beijing wants to handle foreign relations. Worth noting, China has two foreign affairs departments. One works for the state, the other works for the Chinese Communist Party. On Tuesday, Beijing quietly replaced the party's top diplomat with Liu Haixing, a longtime intelligence official. No explanation was given about his predecessor. Liu spent 8 years in China's spy agency. Before that, he was a diplomat focused on Europe. His appointment comes just after Germany jailed a man for spying for China for over 20 years. Back to Beijing, Liu's predecessor has been missing for almost 2 months. Reports say he was arrested. He was seen as a possible future foreign minister for China. A Chinese coffee chain is sparking national security concerns in the U.S. Protesters gathered Tuesday in front of a Luckin Coffee location in Manhattan. NTD's Sean Marshall has more on their concerns.
Luckin Coffee, a Chinese coffee chain, is what some refer to as the new Starbucks. It is now opening locations in the United States after having surpassed Starbucks in China. A protest organized by Bold Action for Freedom, a non-profit organization, was held on September 30th right in front of one of Luckin Coffee's Manhattan locations to warn the public of possible data security problems. A requirement of Luckin Coffee is that you have to download the app to make an order.
This Communist China coffee chain is required per Communist China laws to share any data with the Communist government in China.
Once they have backdoor access, they can steal sensitive information like passwords, financial data, health information, personal chats, intellectual property. They can also gain control over your device to install additional malware that runs commands remotely.
Tony Zielinski is president of Bold Action for Freedom and is spreading the word about CCP risks in the American technology and manufacturing industry.
And they could even, with a hidden backdoor, install malware where the device could be caused to malfunction. And so right now, that's not evident to people that are downloading it. But if we have issues with Communist China down the road, they have this in their back pocket that they can use if that's the direction that they're going.
In 2020, China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology reported Luckin Coffee to have infringed on user rights and illegally collected personal information. And in 2024, Shanghai authorities summoned representatives of Luckin Coffee over what they said was the illicit collection of consumer personal information.
Why does China want our data? Why are they so interested in collecting our data? And the first reason is that it's very profitable and it increases their power. Communist China, has pilfered trillions of dollars of intellectual property from multinational corporations, trillions of dollars. Now, so there's a lot of value in gleaning data, from people and corporations.
Getting the word out about the CCP's human rights abuses, Salih Hudayar has undergone extreme harassment.
Outside of East Turkestan, we've faced extensive transnational repression, harassment. I've had Chinese individuals, stalking me, stalking my house, taking photos. I don't know who shot up my house, but one day when no one was there, just to send a warning, they sent, I guess someone came and shot our windows out.
Representatives of the Tibetan Youth Congress also spoke out to the public about CCP technology and colonial boarding schools. The groups are taking steps to educate the public's understanding of the potential risks that they're undertaking by downloading an app monitored by the Chinese Communist Party. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Coming up, the U.S. government investing $600 million into coal power. This would lower energy costs and help the U.S. win the global race in artificial intelligence, with China as the main rival.
China opened up 93 gigawatts of coal last year. 1 gigawatt runs Denver. So China opened up effectively the power from coal for 93 Denvers.
And Taiwan's government says China is creating a legal basis for a future attack on Taiwan. Officials say the communist regime is twisting a major UN resolution to justify any possible invasion. That and more in just a minute here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Trump administration is investing into coal power to help the U.S. in the AI race countering China. This would upgrade coal plants and keep them open. NTD's David Lamb reports.
The Trump administration announced an investment to boost America's coal industry, putting in $625 million. U.S. Energy Secretary Christopher Wright made the announcement Monday, saying the expanded programs aim to keep coal plants open. This would lower energy costs and enable the U.S. to win the global race in artificial intelligence. $350 million will go towards modernizing coal power units with reliable electric power and capacity, $175 million for projects expected to bring cheaper, reliable energy to rural communities, $50 million to extend the lifespan of coal plants by upgrading wastewater systems, and $50 million into dual fuel and efficiency using 100% natural gas. The Bureau of Land Management is making up to 13.1 million acres of federal coal available for lease, lowering royalty rates to strengthen competitiveness, and streamlining approvals for projects in Montana, Wyoming, Tennessee, and beyond. In June, lawmakers introduced laws to confront the Chinese Communist Party's growing exploitation of AI, as AI touches upon multiple sectors of the economy, including government.
President Trump understands that. He understands that last year in China opened up 93 gigawatts of coal last year. 1 gigawatt runs Denver. So China opened up effectively the power from coal for 93 Denvers.
These actions follow the passing of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Wright said that coal has been under assault for years, even though it's vital for America's industrial might. The programs also aim to add what he called pollution control so that coal plants run cleaner and better. David Lamb, NTD News.
In a disturbing report, Taiwan's government said on Wednesday that Communist China is turning to underhanded legal tricks to assert control over the democratic island nation. It says Beijing is employing a misleading interpretation of a key UN resolution to create the legal basis for a future attack. Here's a closer look.
China says that 1971's UN Resolution 2758, which led to Taiwan's expulsion from the body and Beijing assuming a seat at the UN. China is saying that gives international legal backing to its claims over the island. Taiwan was formerly called the Republic of China. Its government fled to the island in 1949 after losing a civil war with Mao Zedong's communists. The U.S. State Department called China's statements an intentional mischaracterization and misuse of Resolution 2758. It said the comments are part of China's broader coercive attempts to isolate Taiwan from the international community.
A resolution is underway for South Korean workers who were in the U.S. illegally. South Korea says the U.S. has agreed to allow these workers in on short-term visas or through a visa waiver program. The move aims to help staff industrial construction projects in America. The announcement came weeks after South Korea flew home more than 300 of its nationals. They were detained in an immigration raid at a battery factory being built on Hyundai's campus in Georgia. South Korea had pledged hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. investments just weeks earlier in hopes of avoiding the Trump administration's steepest tariffs. South Korea has called for more fundamental steps, including a new visa category to expand access for skilled workers. But U.S. officials say major changes would be difficult, citing legislative constraints. China's state-owned banking system is tightening travel rules for its top managers. Division level and above are now limited to just one overseas trip per year. That's what multiple sources told the Chinese edition of the Epoch Times. The new rule also requires managers at all levels of bank branches to surrender their passports to bank management instead of holding them themselves. And it's not just limited to banks. Other financial institutions overseen by China's State Council, like insurance firms and asset managers, are also covered. China just saw a record wave of money leaving the country. In July, mainland investors moved over $58 billion abroad, the biggest monthly outflow in 15 years. Many are looking for safer or more profitable places to park their money outside China. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.